There are a couple of things that I want to do today. One is to talk about the first reading, and then one is the gospel, because they relate in a way to wisdom. And when we think about King Solomon in the first reading from the first book of Kings, Solomon was, in a way, that wise king, but he fell. And so when we think about the kingdom of Israel, we think about two bookends, if you will, to King David. King David in the middle, and then you have the two bookends of King Saul and King Solomon, and both were very tragic figures. King Saul was the first king of Israel. He was the king that the people wanted. He was tall. He was very charismatic. He was a great leader. He was a great military leader. He was everything out of central casting that you would want in a king. And yet he became very, very jealous, in a way, psychopathically jealous of King David, which then led to his downfall. The same can be said about Solomon, although Solomon was wise. And people would come as the traders, the economic traders would come down from the Middle East or from Europe, and they would come through Israel on their way to Egypt. And they would tell and report back about this country that has this God that is so wise, and the people are wise, and the temple is beautiful and magnificent. And so, in a way, Israel became that light to the nations that it was called to be. But one of the problems with Solomon is that as his economic power continued to grow, he wanted to cement that economic power by having relationships with the surrounding nations. And so, after all, if you marry the king's daughter in a neighboring country, he's not going to want to invade you, or maybe think twice before invading you. So what Solomon did is that he had many, many wives, and they didn't have the God of Israel as their God. They had their own gods, and so they wanted to worship their God. And so what Solomon did was that he created temples and created high places for the wives to worship their God. And so he would come with them. And the problem is with that is that the people would say, well, if it's good enough for the king, it's good enough for me. So let's go. So, one of the things about the kings of Israel was that they weren't just economic leaders or political leaders, but they were also religious leaders. And so as the king went in terms of his relationship with God, so too the people. If you had a good king like David or Hezekiah, the people remained faithful to God. If you had a king that was a really horrible king who had a little bit of God of Israel and a little bit of all the other gods, then so too the people found themselves in that situation. In the gospel, what you have is that you have the conclusion of the parables of the kingdom. And so you have the kingdom of heaven like the buried treasure. A person finds and hides in a field and hides. He goes out with joy, sells all he has, and buys the field. The kingdom of heaven is like the merchant searching for fine pearls. When he finds a pearl of great price, he sells all he has and buys it. So one of the things about a parable is that a parable doesn't necessarily just have one message. A parable, so that people can have a separate message, and that's fine, because when we think about, even with prophecies that relate to David or relate to Jeremiah, they certainly relate to David or Jeremiah, but they also relate in a more profound way in the New Testament to Jesus himself. The same can be said with these two parables. It's kind of like sometimes people think about, the pure person who goes out in search of God and finds the Lord. So there are people in RCIA who are made various studies, and they've thought about Christianity, and they've made the study and looked through all the books and done all those things. And then other people, maybe, a friend or a girlfriend or a boyfriend says, well, how would you like to come to church? And they come, and they find themselves really interested in it. So some just kind of by accident and some by a search. But the one thing we don't want to get into is somehow that the person's doing their own search. Because certainly if a person's doing their own search, they're not going to come up with Christianity. They would probably come up with some kind of a new age, kind of a self-help, kind of a religion or group to join. They certainly would not come up with Christianity unless it was God who was the one orchestrating their search. And so one of the great things on the Eucharistic preface, there's a Eucharistic preface that says, even our desire to thank you is your gift. Is from you. Is your gift itself. So even that desire to give thanks to God is God's gift. I think the same can be said with looking at or searching for God. Is that even that search is God inspiring that person to conduct the search. It's not the person themselves. The other thing is that sometimes there was a person who was a pastor in a Lutheran church who had something interesting. He said that the person doing the search is Jesus himself, because when we think about Jesus, we think about Jesus who gave everything for the bride of Christ. He gave everything for his church, everything that we need for salvation, he gave us, and so was willing to pay the ultimate price on the cross for our salvation, which is also an interesting thought. So again, you can come up with varying explanations. The other thing he talks about is that the kingdom is like the net that's thrown into the sea at the end of the age. They go out, they collect, and they separate the good from the bad. Again, what we think about is that there are many times people who might be, two-faced, or might be a little bit, a little bit both ways. They wanted, to have double life. They want to have, a little bit of the God and maybe on Sunday, but don't come on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Don't come. And so those kind of people who just kind of want to be a little bit of double life, a little bit of Christianity, a lot of the world, those are the ones who are not going to find at the end of time. So again, what it is that inspiration for us to remain faithful to God and to not be duplicitous, or to not be having that double life, but instead what we want to do on Sunday at church is the same that we want to do during the week. So having that same understanding. The other thing is he said, do you understand all these things, to the apostles? And they said, yes. And he said, everyone who's been instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like the householder who brings from the storehouse the old and the new. One of the things, did they understand it? Probably not. They really didn't. But again, what they think about is that the kingdom, the parables of the kingdom, they understood enough to be able to faithfully hand those down after the passion, the death of Jesus. And then when it came time to, when the Christianity continued to spread, and they needed to write down those parables, they were able to faithfully write them down and record them so that we have them here today. Thanks. God bless.